Why do we have illusions of time? Well, the short answer is that some are useful. One of them, as you'll see, is essential. And this is all from natural selection. Let me give you a quick example of what I mean by that. One of the illusions, actually, is that we live in the present when we really live in the past. And the brain has to reconstruct the narration of events. Take this example of a driver who's about to hit a boy on the road, attempting to avoid it. And he reports awareness. He thinks he's aware of it when that happens. 150 milliseconds after he reports the awareness, he feels that he has stepped on the brake, and he reflexly has. But it's not until about 500 milliseconds, a full half second later, that he has this awareness of the boy on the road. His brain has it, and then that's when he's deciding to act. That's when he refers that consciousness back to the time when the boy actually ran on the road. It's a reconstruction. It's called a post-diction. And one of the experiments to demonstrate what the brain does, it warms up with this readiness potential. If you perform an EEG on a person, for example, you will note that the voltage gradually increases for a full half second before the muscle actually contracts. Let me give you a more specific example. So let's say we ask somebody to press a key, and then observe what the brain does. There's this warm up period starting at minus 500 milliseconds, and then reaches a peak when the muscle of the finger presses. And if you ask the person when they feel that they made that decision, it's at 150 milliseconds before the muscle contracted. So the decision in the brain, the warm up, started long before. Now, of course, that raises the issue of free will, which we can't talk about here today. But what it means is that the brain is working in the past. We think we're living in the present. If there was no illusion of living in the present, if we just took in information the way it comes in, at whatever rate it comes in, what would happen is the boy runs on the road. Reflexly, the foot would hit the brake. He might feel that and notice it, but only a half second later would it dawn on him. He would say, now I'm aware why my foot braked. I sure wish I was in charge. So that's the peculiarity of the way the brain has to deal with the past and the present. And unfortunately, it all works out. But there's some more profound results from the illusory system of the brain. And my colleagues and I refer to this as a dualistic mind time. That is, the brain has two parts. One that actually deals with the physical properties of time, measuring duration, for example, but another illusory system, one that provides a different way of interpreting time, so that the human can have a better experience. Now, these illusions of the mind are illustrated notably by Albert Einstein in his Block universe. You know, of course, that the conventional view is that events and objects start in the future, they reach the present, disappear into the past. But most physicists adhere to some version of the Block universe, where in fact all the events that have occur remain. The past remains. It's a block of events, as it were. And for Einstein, it included the future. That presents a very interesting situation. For one thing, in this Block universe, there's no persistence. And when Einstein's best friend Besso died, Einstein contacted the widow, and to console her, said that he is still there. Why is he still there? Because in the Block universe, all the events don't simply disappear. And persistence is an illusion, as it were. Well, you can see this much better in the following way, because to appreciate it, let me demonstrate the way we normally think of ourselves, objects and events and ourselves, as moving through time. But in the block universe, as you'll see here below, events are much more staticky. It's not a frozen universe. The events are there, but they happen, but they're staticky. And the universe, for some physicists, actually expands. The point is, there's no actual motion for physics the way we think of motion. This is quite a conundrum that really goes all the way back to the Greek philosophers, who would ask the question even then: is time an illusion? Is time real? And the short answer is today, I think that it is both, and for the reasons I'm mentioning. The mind is dualistic. We have experiences of real time and corresponding illusory experiences. We have both sets. Let's start with motion versus movement. They're not the same. Movement is a change of position of an object, say, from point A to point B. That's movement. Machinery and cameras can detect movement. Motion is more. When we experience motion, we mean that we're talking about the interval between point A and point B. And then that's always assumed, but it's not necessarily real. And here's what I mean by that. There's good evidence to indicate that motion is an illusion, particularly with this continuous wagon wheel example. If we look at a wagon wheel that keeps turning, as it gets faster and faster, at some point is reached where it starts to look like it's going backwards. And you've seen this on the street watching a hubcap of a car. The brain has a discrete perception of about 10 to 12 frames per second, so that when the hubcap or wheel starts to move faster and faster, you're getting a different pickup and you'll get a weird sensation. And it's because the brain is painting motion on between the frames. That's what our brain does. It makes a continuous perception out of what would otherwise be discrete. Fortunately, we would still be able to deal with the environment if we didn't have continuous motion. Here's an example of a bird flying through the air. And this is what it would look like if we didn't have continuous motion. A hunter, therefore, would still be able to catch his prey. The world wouldn't look quite as aesthetic. It would be discrete, not continuous. Let's look at another one. This is a fascinating one. Chronological order. The brain innately has this ability, but it also has an illusory component called temporality. Temporality is the before-after experience. We all have it. We can't run away from it. It's what we perceive from one event to another. Take this soccer ball example. On the left, you see there, the boy kicks the ball. That's event one. The ball hits the net. That's event two. That's the information. But in addition to the information, there's the feeling of the before and the after. That's sort of the flow of time. But on the right, notice that the information could be identical without temporality. If I show you a card with the boy kicking the ball and then another card with it going into the net, and they're time coded, you get the same information. It's chronological order only, but there's no temporality. And this third and very important illusion is that of persistence, object persistence, and the enduring self. That's because we we don't consider ourselves to be like the block universe, a series of events. Uh, it's not a series of besos. We are continuous. We have an enduring self, but it's an illusion of an enduring self. Every once in a while, though, we do ask ourselves, ironically, am I the same person? Because we do recognize that we make these horrendous changes during the course of our life physically. And in fact, almost every cell in the body is replaced over time. And yet we can't help but say that there's something about us that endures, there's something about us that persists. It's so difficult to get rid of that self illusion, and that's what it is. It's a self illusion. So one of the experiments I did with my colleagues was to develop this virtual reality apparatus that allows us to virtually go backwards in time. It's not a time machine, obviously. You can see here the individual is wearing the apparatus, which has a head tracking system to know where he's at. And when the computer and video information is recorded and saved, so that when he chooses to go into the past, let's say 3, 4, 5 minutes in the past, he can do so, and the experience is vivid, very, very vivid. So much so that it's possible to get lost as to whether or not you're in the past or the present, unless you pay attention to some cues. But there's one more very interesting pilot study we did that deals with this issue of the self-illusion. And that is this particular observer who's watching a small electronic dog that's walking around on the floor. When he's in the past, and notice he's looking to the right, the dog is in the present, of course, on the left, so but he sees it on the right. But when he hits the button to go back to the present, then he sees the dog suddenly, immediately to his left, and has no better explanation as to the sudden change in its position, other to come to the conclusion that this does not appear to be the same dog. So the illusion, the object persistence illusion, was removed in this fashion. Now, if there was no self-illusion, what would it mean? Well, it would be terrible, really, because there would be no symphony of past events to construct a personality. There would be no way to develop our character. We would not know who we are. We would just, and most animals do not have that self-awareness. And so this is the most important of all the illusions. In short, the brain has this dualistic approach with experiences of real time, but as a result of the passage of time with evolution and the changes that we humans have made, we fortunately have the illusory system to have a much better experience of the world. Thank you very much.